Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing 1, 2, 3 with a live show. All right. Just let people filter in. All right, we're going to start this fresh. The gist of today's live is to allow people to ask questions because there's some really good information that I'm going to share, and I'm going to be trying to make as much sense of it as I can. And if you want to ask questions, please put them in the comments. I'm going to be sharing what other people have said in the Point Raise Restoration group. I'm not going to share any names. I'm not going to show anything in order to protect identities. But the information is too good not to share. And there's so much of it that if I don't just do this live, it'll never happen. So here we go. Here's the gist. As you know, the Nature Conservancy negotiated with ranchers. The media claims that this was a secret Biden era deal, when the reality is that the secret was between the Nature Conservancy and the ranchers. And the ranchers, once again, got paid millions of dollars. And here we are with the Nature Conservancy asking for money from the Wildlife Conservation Board for $2.7 million for Point Reyes National Seashore. Remember, the $40 million is primarily for human beings, compensation for the human beings that were involved in the buyout. The Park Service themselves still need funding, which they should have more funding now that they aren't dealing with all of the overhead of having the ranchers there. Unfortunately, not all the ranchers are gone, which is part of the issue that we are going to be talking about today. And Laura responds to FYI, here's a link to the upcoming August 28th agenda for various projects, which will include a presentation to fund TNC's Point Reyes restoration work for the 2025 management plan revision. And then someone else says, thanks for finding this. It appears to be rubber stamped for approval, which means that it's going to go through no matter what. It's not even really a proposal. And is exempted from CEQA review. And that is the California Environmental Quality Act. So it's exempted from that. It's amazing how many times stewards of the land get exempted from anything environmentally related, such as the water waivers, as well as tearing off of the Park Service's revised general management plan amendment record of decision of 2025, which is somewhat vague in many places. More plans are called for future development. A process which I commented on along the way, saying these future plans were wrongfully deferred from the NEPA review, another environmental protection that just kind of gets thrown to the side when it comes to planning in Point Reyes National Seashore. We should be asking MPS to open up a public volunteer program to help restoration efforts. Yeah, instead of excuses of why they can't do it, volunteers will often solve any human power issues, any cost issues, because people care about this enough to volunteer. But of course, as many of you know, one of the volunteers in the past spoke out about what the Park Service was doing, and after receiving an award for her service was booted by Point Reyes National Seashore Park Service. So maybe that's one reason that they aren't too into having the volunteers. This response is a little long, so I'm going to go on to the next one. Someone asks, can't the elk do the targeted grazing that cattle are going to be brought back into the park for? So that helps skip forward to the issue at hand, and that's that ranchers got paid again to leave. They're pocketing the money and leaving with their cattle only to spend for us to spend even more money to bring other cattle in. So the cattle, in my mind, aren't really gone. Just because they aren't there 24/7, I've seen enough damage from livestock to know that they don't have to be there 24/7. You bring them in temporarily to do targeted grazing, and they're going to do targeted damage. This person, rightfully so, asked why we can't use elk to do this. Indeed, why can't we? Um, I'm sure a lot of people have their own answers to this, but um, I've asked the same thing, especially when you hear, "Oh my God, we're running out of habitat. Oh, these animals are endangered. Oh, and they need a place to go." And it's like, "Oh, well, here's a national park, and they aren't even allowed uh, to roam around in there." And people talk about how livestock mimic wildlife grazing. Well, why not just use livestock? I mean, wildlife. Everybody's concerned about, uh, well, gee, we don't have any wildlife left, so we have to use livestock because it's the closest thing we have to ungulates grazing. No, we have some wildlife, and you're still choosing not to use them. Now, some people think that there aren't enough Thule elk to get the job done, but I'll tell you what, you don't know until you try. You don't know until uh, you let them do it. And the Point Reyes National Park Service has already told me in an interview with Melanie Gunn that they aren't going to let the elk thrive. They won't let their populations increase. So anyone who has high hopes, unless their attitude has changed, there's a dampener for you. Uh, I love the concept that an animal these ranchers and people at large consider unintelligent and therefore not worthy of compassion are somehow intelligent enough to eat this plant and not that plant. Um, yeah, I appreciate that. Let me spend some time on this comment from Fabdonk. I don't want to say it incorrectly. I'm not saying animals aren't intelligent, but we can jump past the whole circle of people that get offended by the concept that animals are intelligent by simply saying that this is based on a relationship. This is called ecology. This is um, a wild animal that for thousands of years lived in an area where these wild plants also lived and they developed a relationship. You don't eat everything that you come across as a human being. Well, actually, as human beings come pretty close to eating everything in their path now, don't they? But if you look at wildlife, they eat specific things. This always stood out to me when working with sharks because people have this idea that the only thing sharks want to do is go around and eat everything in their path. No, there's a reason that there's 500 species of them. They have different jobs, different roles, and jobs in nature usually have a lot to do with what you eat because you're regulating populations. So again, let's extend that to the terrestrial world, and different animals have different jobs, and it just works out great in the complicated system that some animals enjoy this plant and other animals enjoy that plant. Some animals enjoy eating this animal or are designed to be able to kill this animal, and it all ends up working out great. It's actually pretty magnificent when you stop and look at the intricacies of the system. Um, if livestock were so good at mimicking, this person continues, grazing, ranchers would not have waged war against plants that produce alkaloids that kill them. Yeah, thank you. Hey, I'm glad you're here because you're providing some great comments, uh, such as lupins, larkspurs, milkweeds, and others. Yeah. Look at the ranch land in Point Reyes National Seashore. You're not seeing many of the plants this person just mentioned, because these ranchers have gone out of their way to kill native plants and replace them with plants that they want to feed to their livestock. And in other cases, ranchers train animals to start eating plants that they didn't like previously. This has been done with goats. Anyway, continuing with this intriguing conversation. Targeted grazing requires holding the animals in small enclosures using portable electric fencing to keep them where the targeted grazing is quote unquote needed. I can't see that working with elk. Well, right. I mean, if you are in fact going to try and force a wild animal to behave like a domesticated animal, that means you're going to have to capture them, right? That's a mess by itself. The injuries, the overhead, and doing it, and then sticking them into an enclosed area. You know, just jump past all of that and forget the targeted part of it, and let nature do what nature does. All we as humans have to do is get out of the way and be a little bit patient. The elk are going to target what they need to target, although they probably aren't going to be as inclined to eat a non-native plant for the very reasons that I just explained a little bit ago. That's not what they were evolutionarily designed for. That's not the relationship that they developed in California with these native plant systems. So, yeah, it's not really a stretch to say that the elk don't want to continue to graze down those weeds, which really brings me to something that's probably the most important in here, is that grazing doesn't work very well on these annual European invasive grasses and other plants like that, because they're annuals anyway, and at best you shorten them. I think that this person mentions this. I read this part ahead of time. So let me read this, and I think it's going to bring it back to what I want to say. Someday, when there are enough elk to keep a good balance between grass and brush in the seashore, there will be a basis for demanding that the cows be removed, but unfortunately, not now under the terms of this settlement agreement. By the way, goats are better than cows in removing non-native and invasive plants. When they eat the plant, the seeds are destroyed by their very acidic stomachs. Not so with cows. They just spread the seeds wherever they go. At least that's what I read here. And then he provides a link. So I've spent 7 years documenting the damage that goats do. And while their stomachs may destroy a lot of the seeds, I actually wanted to prove whether that was true or not, and started collecting, believe it or not, goat poop and putting it in soil pots and seeing if plants would spring from it. And one day, as I was collecting the poop, I'm looking at the ground and I'm thinking, what am I doing? Because what was I picking the poop up from? A blanket of invasive plant seeds. I'm like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if the seeds are passed on through the poop, because there's so many seeds still here after the goats come through. These invasive plants produce seeds on a crazy level. The abundance is out of control, and this is absolutely part of why they're so successful. If you look at livestock, whether it's the cattle or the goats, a lot of what they do is trample and knock things over. A lot of times it's an illusion of the vegetation being reduced or shortened. Well, it is shortened in the sense of it being knocked over, but it's still there, and the seeds are certainly there. You're not going to get rid of the problem this way. You're not. Humans are going to have to interject here and hand pull, remove, and incinerate these plants and replace them with the natives. That's really the piece that tends to be missing. When you put a new plant in place of where the other one was trying to live, well, that makes it pretty hard for the other plant to exist because that space has already been taken. That is the key. I don't know how that is so hard for people to wrap their heads around. Anyway, uh, get that comment off the screen. Looks like I missed Karen. Sorry for the hiccup with the technology earlier, Corinne. And this is interesting. MPS has apparently used goats on the D Ranch, where cows are excluded south of the ranch complex and are heavily used by the Drake's Beach elk herd. MPS has also, well, I didn't know that they took goats out there. I guess that helps explain the weeds that Bay Denatured magazine was complaining about. In fact, MPS did so shortly before the recent Bay Nature Walk. Really? So they got things nice and showy and ready, huh? Hmm. By the way, the number 2 Bay Nature person who ran the recent walk of the D Ranch got her start in journalism at the Point Reyes Light. Yeah, that's not a good resume, in my opinion, if you're looking for integrity. And someone asks, if you're talking about a good balance between grass and brush, what are you talking about? Are humans ever going to be smart enough to know or to dictate what that balance is? Thank you. I would say that humans just declare that they are that smart from the get go, whether they are or not. Hey, I'm a human being. I always know right, even though everything I try to improve, I mess up. But I think an important distinction here is what grass are we talking about? Are we talking about the perennial grasses, the native grasses that are supposed to be there? Because there's a balance. There's a positive balance if you want to talk about a balance between brush and that grass. But we don't want any of the non-native grass that the ranchers have gone out of their ways to infest Point Reyes National Seashore and, in fact, California with. As when that balance is achieved, you say there will be a basis for demanding that cows be removed. That suggests a belief that cattle are presently factors in maintaining something like a good balance. Thank you. I'm actually liking what this person is saying. The cattle do not maintain a good balance. The cattle shorten things that aren't supposed to be there and also make sure that those things that aren't supposed to be there keep coming back. You're just promoting continuing to feed cattle. This has been the ranchers' argument for why they need to be in Point Reyes National Seashore. Thank you. Fantastic comments. You see why I'm just reading this today. It's like having great guests on the show. It has not been our argument and is not the ecological argument. Thank you. I don't think we should buy into the ranchers' grass equals good, brush equals bad mantra. Thank you. I'd venture that the good balance is what it was when Tule elk were the prime grazers here. Yes, indeed. But that was a very long time ago. You'd have to look into some historical books to find out what that is. And you'd have to find some books that look beyond ranchers, because in the rancher world, history began when they got there. This person says they didn't find the project on goats and their employment in the rescue in Nevada of the Carson wandering skipper butterfly to be reassuring. Oh, we're getting into a whole nother show here. Given the land management records and the biases of those two agencies, I think you have to be leery of their science and their good ideas. Thank you again. I know what the East Bay Hills look like after goats have reduced fuel there. Aristotle wrote about goats and their role in denuding Greece. Yes, goats eat invasives, but then goats eat everything, native plants too. See, I'll stop you there. How closely have you looked at the East Bay Hills? Because once again, the goats shorten it and trample other things to death. But most importantly, what they do first and foremost is go after what few natives remain, because they're more appealing, they're more appetizing. Have you ever looked at dry ripgut brome or um, wild oats, slender oats. Have you ever, or Italian thistle, dried up Italian thistle? No, it's not what you want to put in your mouth or stomach, even if you're a goat, if you have an alternative. So sadly, reducing fuel in that way, first and foremost, means reducing native plants. This seems like almost parable on what's wrong with targeted grazing. When land managers decide to target anything, watch out. Thank you. Thank you. The classic study is Aldo Leopold's on the crash of deer populations on the Kaibab Plateau when the agencies to boost deer populations targeted wolves and mountain lions. So now with goats in Nevada, we have the agencies targeting overgrown vegetation and biomass in order to save one insect, the Carson wandering skipper. That's not how nature manages ecosystems, by attacking biomass. Thank you. The whole for the benefit of one organism. What else gets lost along the way? Jeez. Number one, this is an excuse to have another form of livestock grazing. It's just the goats. And as I've said, I'd like someone to show me one place where the goats actually solved the issue. I mean, we're talking decades, and the same fucking thing happens every year. Oh, we got to come in and manage that fire fuel. Do you ever want to actually solve the problem? Or have we all bought into perpetually spending tax dollars? You would think it would be enough that we're giving these livestock owners a free meal. No, you're actually paying them to eat a free meal, which is destroying nature. And it happens over and over and over and over and over again. Now, here they're justifying it by trying to save this skipper. I guess that's some sort of an insect, which I don't have a problem with that, except that the whole thing is based on a lie, and you're just using the skipper butterfly as your scapegoat. All right. Got any new comments here? Oh. And Corinne says she can hear me perfectly now. Great. Glad to have you back. Fab Dancy. All right. Seeds also can get stuck in hair attached to the animal. Yes, that's an obvious one that I didn't mention. They do spread. They spread them in their fur, in their hooves. Whether, we focused on whether or not they get spread in the fecal matter. Well, these are hairy animals, and these are animals with hooves that have things embedded in them, especially after trampling them. I chose to focus on the fact that there are so many seeds on the ground, even after the job is done, that none of what we're talking about even matters. It doesn't matter if they poop them out. They never got rid of the problem in the first place. And the only thing missing is the next watering. And you will, no matter what time of year it is, if you water those invasive seeds that are still there on the ground, they will start to grow. I mean, you could give them a gram of soil and they'll start to grow. They'll start to grow on the side of a rock. Especially when they bed down in the trampled vegetation. Some plants specifically evolved for this transportation. Thank you. I'm really enjoying having you on here. Corinne says, human-created livestock has no place in nature. Yes, and you know why? Amongst many reasons, they don't have that relationship that I talked about at the beginning, explaining why some animals eat certain plants and why some animals eat other animals. These people just brought a commodity in from another continent and dropped it in order to consume the area there so that those people could slaughter that animal that got fattened off of eating everything in front of it. That's not ecology. That's commodity. How are people doing? You want me to keep reading this? Oh, what time is it? Yeah, we'll keep going. Thank you for posting that last paragraph. Hallelujah. Incremental progress is better than nothing. Hats off to you as well. Wait, what? Um, Hats off to you as well as everyone else, as you know, but especially you for being such an amazing resource and a persistent and courageous advocate for our Earth. Gee, that's more positive than I'm willing to be. Incremental progress. I'm just pretty scared that we're being led astray again by an illusion of incremental progress because really what has happened here is that ranchers got paid yet again. Some ranchers have remained, and even where ranchers left, we're now having to spend money to bring cattle back in instead of actually giving Point Reyes National Seashore to the wildlife and seeing if the wildlife can, in fact, do what the wildlife are designed to do. And if we go back to the comment about targeted grazing, every time that they bring the cattle back in and build fences, once again, that land is going to become an exclusion zone. And any wildlife, see, I'm picturing elk, and that's easy for everyone else to visualize because they're big and you're used to seeing photos of elk standing out there in Point Reyes. They obviously aren't going to be allowed in that fenced in area with the cattle. So, once again, elk, you don't get this land. But what about the animals that, with the absence of the cattle, make the mistake of thinking, oh, wow, I can set up a nest here. I can burrow here. I can make a den here. I can do this and that and the other thing here. And then the next thing you know, nope, here come the cattle again. Smash, smash, smash. This plan is dumb. This plan is dumb. I'm sorry, but this fucking Nature Conservancy settlement is dumb. As I understand it, the settlement requires targeted grazing. Yes, it's exactly. That's what the Nature Conservancy negotiated with the ranchers, which is dumb. That means that they aren't the Nature Conservancy. You are the Cattle Conservancy because you are making sure that cattle grazing continues. If there's some wiggle room there, let me know. And again, he's just making the point that this is a requirement to do the targeted grazing, which means that damage is required and true progress is going to be hindered. At some point, there will be enough elk that they will be as much of a force as to grazing as the 600 to 1,200 cows the Nature Conservancy is going to bring in for targeted grazing under the settlement. 600 to 1,200 cows brought in. Do you know how much that's going to cost? You know how much damage that's going to cause? You want to see the elk population increase. Let the elk there feel and understand that they have an opportunity to expand. I mean, there are checks and balances in place in nature. When you realize, oh, there's nowhere for me to go establish a new herd, there's nowhere for me to get my own harem, then you're going to reduce the chances of that population of animals increasing. Have you really given Point Reyes back to the elk? As far as I know, progress halted immediately when the ranchers started whining, and they haven't made any more progress since then. And yet everybody's talking about the elk have all of Point Reyes National Seashore to wander through. And as someone else mentions in this correspondence, they've only seen one of the ranches actually start to vacate their cattle. Only one. And that was Lunny because he bought some property up in the Sierras amongst his other properties. 1,200 freaking cows. Anyway, this person is looking to the future. Hey, we can push for there not to be a need to bring in 1,200 cows when we have 1,200 elk? Are we ever going to get to 1,200 elk if this is the attitude that we have? You're still prioritizing cattle. And I mean, if their attitude was to use wildlife, they could do it. They could do it now. By the way, elk aren't the only option. There are native deer, and pronghorn could be brought in. One of the people on here has done a lot of work proving that pronghorn are supposed to be there. Well, people, I bet you there are pronghorn that could use some habitat. Let's bring in some pronghorn. Nope. Let's bring in the very animals that this settlement just fought to get rid of. Jeez. Oh. I see this argument made in Texas at all. I mean, in Texas all the time. Yes, of course you do. Of course you do. Uh, Especially where people have no idea that most of Texas has been plowed over. That's pretty much how I picture Texas now. What a horrible turn of events, bringing back cattle. What a loss of opportunity. Our dream of free elk is over, it seems. Hey, see, this is why we need a positive person on here to keep your hopes up that things are, in fact, improving. Where's Jack? Call in. Wish I could get some of these people in this correspondence to call in. Uh-oh. I know there are some of us who think that if we let nature take its course, things will go back to the way they were originally. Again, I'm no expert, but Tamala's Point hasn't gone back to what it was before man and his cattle arrived there. It's pretty much remained as it was when Merv McDonald and his cattle were removed following the reintroduction of the elk in 1978. There have been some inroads of brush into grassy areas, but not very much, and I think that is likely due to the elk and their grazing. The non-native and invasive weed problem has probably gotten worse, possibly due to the continued ranching outside of the elk fence. Well, I can tell you for a fact that you can see the adjacent silage field plants expanding into the elk reserve. Coincidence? The plants intentionally being grown by the ranchers next door are finding their way into the elk reserve. Gee, who would have thought? But I will counter what this person said a little bit, because Point Reyes National Seashore Park Service actually had to amend their original carry capacity estimate because the conditions of Tamales Point improved so much after the cattle removal. To me, that indicates that there was indeed a change, and a change for the positive. I hope that someone else counters this in the email below. There's a lot of responses, so I actually don't even know yet. I'm going to go ahead and call bullshit. I doubt if it returned to the pristine state that it used to be. I mean, you allow humans in there for starters, so that's going to be a problem by itself. But I'm just going to say there's no way in hell it hasn't improved significantly with the removal of cattle. You look at the rest of Point Reyes National Seashore where ranching takes place, and it's night and day. So it's hard for me to believe that the McDonald Ranch was the one ranch where cattle and native plants had a healthy working relationship out of all of them out there. Let's see. What do people think about that? I'll read your comments. Okay, let's go down. Your mention of the Kebab Plateau debacle brought on by President Teddy Roosevelt, an avid hunter, reminded me of my wildlife biology course at the University of Wisconsin. The lesson was one of many we learned. Kill all the predators, as Roosevelt ordered, because the kebab deer grew such impressively large antlers that Teddy considered great hunting trophies. And we learned the herbivores will eat themselves out of house and home and die of starvation. That course and my delightful professor, Joe Hickey, almost caused me to become a wildlife biologist. Joe was Aldo Leopold's successor. Interesting. Again, I'm reminded of what Melanie Gunn said, that they would not allow the elk population to thrive, whether the fence came down or not. And then she also cited a lack of predators to help manage the population. And it just blows my mind. Where predators allowed to exist if they can't exist in a national park? And I understand it incorporates recreation, hiking, etc. So your biggest obstacle, of course, is going to be people that don't actually want nature to be present in nature. But prior to that, it was the ranchers who didn't want predators, not because they were scared of the predators, but because it conflicted with their commodity animals. So here we are, still not allowing nature to take place because of human excuses. And people don't want the elk to get beyond the borders of Point Reyes National Seashore because at the end of the day, what percent of human beings actually are ready and willing to live side by side with nature? You know, I can't, the people who complain about deer in their yards already, I'm guessing they'd be some of the first ones to complain about elk expanding. Rather than talking about a balance between grass and brush, I probably should have just said cows should be removed when there are enough elk to graze, where grazing is supposedly needed. I'm going to stop right there. Who even knows how many that is? Who gets to say when we've reached enough elk to do this? And are you going to force the elk to move into an area? Man, the fence came down. Didn't a lot of us envision, oh, here's the opportunity for the elk to naturally move to spots that they feel comfortable in, unless a more dominant male says, nope, keep moving, and claims that spot? I mean, however it works. I thought we were going to get the hell out of the way and let the elk population change the way that it is naturally going to change. And of course, the ranchers don't have to be out of there until March of 2026. So this vision that the elk even really have the opportunity to claim new spots is flawed. But what was I saying is that you don't even know how many elk are needed. And it's not going to compare to livestock because elk, the way they're designed, like most wild animals, don't just go in and eat everything in their path. I've documented this myself. It's fascinating. When I've tried to restore areas and I think, geez, the animals here don't have much to eat. I wonder if they're going to go against their instincts and wipe out what I'm trying to do here just because they need food so badly. And they still didn't. They munched a little here, munched a little there, and always allowed the plant to be healthy enough to continue. Cattle don't do that. Livestock don't do that. You can't compare 1,200 cattle to 1,200 elk. If your idea is for elk to munch down these invasive grasses the way that cattle do, well, that's flawed from the beginning. They don't want that shit. I mean, they'll eat it, but again, give some Thule elk a plot of land with native plants, especially native grasses, if you can miraculously find any, and a plot of land with shit that isn't supposed to be here at all. All my money goes on the elk are going to eat what they were ecologically designed to eat. And they also aren't going to eat it very fast because, once again, they ecologically are designed not to wipe out their food source. I'm not a big fan of the settlement overall. This response continues. Given the cattle the Nature Conservancy, Neiman, and Evans will have, plus the cattle the 7 GGRNA ranchers have, that's a lot of cattle remaining. Yeah, it is. And it's a lot of land where elk aren't welcome. And I'll never know why plaintiffs, NPS and TNC, didn't at least try to get Neiman, Evans, and the 7 GGNRA ranchers to agree to buyouts. Things would have been a lot better put there without for-profit ranching. Well, some members of the plaintiffs did push for that. Some members of the plaintiff groups aren't happy about this settlement. Some of the people that were outspoken were left out of the talks. I was being too picky as usual. I'm in total agreement with your amendment here of your point, where grazing is supposedly needed, does the job for me. And as you say, the settlement provides for grazing, so the need to work within that frame is just pragmatic reality. Oh, well, that's exactly what they wanted you to say. That's exactly what they wanted you to say. Well, it's written into the agreement, so you have to go along with it, and let's just hope for the best. Hope for the best when we know for a fact that it isn't going to work. When uncertain, try out alternatives. Ugh, I don't like where this paragraph's going. Let me see if anyone's commented real quick. How did McDonald achieve that? Oh, well, the Pierce Point Ranch, that's just where his ranch was. I actually don't know exactly what your question is asking. The McDonald's were there originally and then were moved elsewhere. And geez, wasn't McClure? Some ranches moved around, and then eventually whoever was there last was moved to a new spot so that Pierce Point, Tomales Point, could be used for the elk relocation program. But please let me, Corinne, please let me know what exactly you're asking. The only predators allowed to exist are humans. Yeah. And this is a point of contention with some people. We are consumers. I don't know so much that we're predators. Yes, we eat prey, but do we do it like predators do? I mean, we're omnivores, no doubt. Human beings at this point are willing to shove just about anything in their mouths. So, including meat, obviously. I don't think that by itself makes us predators. I once argued the other direction because I wanted to think we were predators. I like the idea of it. It's a sexy club to be in. Oh, we're like the lions and tigers and bears and sharks. No. What a ridiculous thing to say. I understand why we want to be in that club. We're not there. But we are in a different club that's cool if we were to embrace what we're actually capable of. You know, our ability to create and nurture is actually really cool and unique. The ability to destroy is not unique. Corinne says, how did they achieve the preservation of the native grasses? Who? I don't know of any native grasses. Like I think there's 2% of native grassland remaining in all of California. So you get a handful of grasses here and there that you can find, but How did they achieve the preservation of the native grasses? McDonald's. I don't think they did. I don't really see many native grasses out there when I hike. You've got the brush, and you do see some rushes um, and things like that. I don't know how many people consider those grasses. There might be some bunch grasses out there, but like a field, a prairie of grasses. No. You thought I said they did. I said that they have more native vegetation out there than the rest of Point Reyes National Seashore, at least compared to ranch areas. I've hiked it with ecologist Laura Cunningham and some other wildlife people, and we found some pretty wonderful native plant areas. But what every single one of those has in common is no cattle. And what every single place with cattle has in common is a lack of native plants and an influx of invasive thistles and invasive grasses. You will find things like lupin and coyote brush, etc., and some wonderful flowers. Like I remember coming across Coast Indian paintbrush out there. Obviously yarrow, things like that. I'm just saying that there's way more of that in the elk reserve than on ranch land. And that was once ranch land. And I have a hard time believing that that place has not improved since the cattle were removed, as that one person was trying to say, that it's basically stayed the same. I really have a hard time believing that, although there is still an invasive plant problem for sure. Sadly, when you hike off trail, which I did in order to bring food and water to the elk, you're hiking through that nasty European shit that stabs you and embeds its seeds in every single piece of you that it can, which brings us back to the beginning of this conversation, talking about seed proliferation and the spreading of those seeds. You do not need an animal pooping these seeds out for them to spread. They will get inside of you. They will get inside your clothing. They'll get inside hair and fur. They will get in orifices and into organs. Well, hello, Jack from Tree Spirit Project, joining in. I've said a lot on here, so I don't know what you've heard, but I'm not going to backtrack. I'm actually going to wrap up pretty quick. I have found this, like I said at the beginning with my justification, there's so much information in this conversation. I might have to break this into a part 2. Oh, so I'll read one more, which is very sad. And I'll read 2 more. I couldn't agree with you more on what is the good balance between grass and brush and managing ecosystems for one organism. Humans far too often try to shape ecosystems in their image. Thank you. Instead of letting the ecosystem shape itself. And this makes me think of the point I was making about us maybe trying to shape where the tule elk end up going. I have had many discussions with biologists who claim coyote brush is invasive. Well, that's pretty sad to hear. But with Audubon Society and Point Blue and other garbage previously nature-friendly organizations who have sold out to the cattle industry, I'm not surprised that you're hearing biologists saying that, because that's what they're hearing be said and they're repeating it. Just because someone's a biologist doesn't immediately make them wise or more intelligent than others. They got a different degree than you did, and it wasn't that many more science classes than you took. I'm sorry to say. Characterizing a native plant as invasive is a dangerous precedent, in my opinion. Well, that's what the ranchers accomplished, though. The ranchers call coyote brush invasive, while acting as if it's very important for us to make sure that their non-native grasses continue to grow, because it's part of the scenic part. This person says, the big picture, the elk can now roam freely. No, they can't. The dairies have moved out. No, They haven't. And most ranchers are too. Nope. Nope. And I already skipped ahead because I know that one person mentioned that Lunny's the only one who's really loaded up anything. Oh, and by the way, remember, McClure shut down in 2021, and yet we're still waiting for him to leave. We need to monitor the regeneration, and the next steps will become apparent then. I'm sorry, I don't agree. People who are experienced in this field know what the next steps are right now, and that's to get rid of the cattle and let native animals move in. The elk are not roaming freely. How the hell can the elk be roaming freely when the ranchers haven't left? Fencing is still up, and other fencing is proposed to keep coming in. This is what I talked about earlier, Jack, if you weren't on. Elk, as they try to establish new areas, are going to get pushed out of those areas every time the targeted grazing programs come in. And with 600 to 1,200 cattle, my God. Let me check comments. Give them heaven on earth, Skylar. That's his way of saying hell. Agree 100%. Managing wild forests and other wildlands is oxymoronic. Also, regular old moronic. I filmed something for you this morning, Jack. I'll share it with you. Laura Cunningham's tour of PRNS is September 9th. 300 miles of fencing prevents free elk movement, as you're saying. 300 miles, people. And you know what Point Reyes National Park Service was planning on doing before you, the wonderful public, spoke up? They were going to add even more. They were going to add even freaking more, and you were going to pay for it with your dollars, and the wildlife were going to pay for it with their appendages. 300 miles of fencing out there, and the elk are roaming freely. Sorry. I'm not going to say who wrote that, but sorry, you are naively mistaken. It's 10 a.m. And I'm getting worked up. I'll read two more paragraphs. Robert, as far as I know, Jesus Christ. Well, none of you know who that is, but oops. As far as I know, my last visit on August 7th, the only ranch with residential use where all the cows have been removed and residential use has stopped is the Lunny Ranch. That's what I was saying earlier. I think Lunny found a place in the Sierra foothills. Please don't graze out there, which too many people already are. And then people are going to wonder why the foothills are going up in flame. He needed the settlement money to close on the new place, so he moved more quickly than the others. That's an interesting explanation for why Lunny moved faster than the other guys. The ranchers have, God, I can only imagine what his new place is like with the amount of money he already had. The ranchers have until the beginning or end of March 2026, which I said earlier, to leave. That's a long time from now, people. Given the absurdly low monthly rents, for example, everyone listen to this, by the way. This is just a wonderful tidbit of information tucked into a conversation, but this will blow your mind. $2,000 for H&M ranches, up to a high of $3,000 for I Ranch, and the 4 to 8 houses that each of the residential ranches have. I Ranch has 8 residences if you include one freestanding garage in the middle of them with large plate glass windows on the sides to rent out at possibly $2,000 to $3,000 each. But the entire massive acreage of I Ranch and every building on it rents for $3,000. They would be fools to leave before then, is the point that this person is making. I won't be surprised if some ask for more time. And this is exactly what my pessimistic ass says, are they even leaving? One guy wanted to buy a house and has a bunch of money and other businesses elsewhere. So he's cried up a river every chance he's had on his way out. Who needs cows to make money ranching on our seashore land? Yeah, no shit. Again, those of you who are unfamiliar with the management plan that the Park Service was about to adopt without us interfering, these guys were going to be running bed and breakfasts. They were going to have tour shops. They were going to start having even more animals, different species of animals, row crops, horse stables. I mean, when you're paying next to nothing for the land and the taxpayer is fitting your expenses bills, yeah, you pretty much run about any business you want to out there and be successful. And all the while they carry on about how the real reason they want to be there is because of the rich history of dairy. And that's what their grandpa did and their grandpa did. But as soon as there's an opportunity to make money, fuck dairy. As long as we're making money out here one way or another with our cheap leases. And by the way, everybody who thinks that ranchers are getting forced out, remember that McClure was shutting down way before this happened because the land just couldn't support his abuse anymore, which is the reality of dairies everywhere. Is anyone else going to comment besides Jack? Not that I don't want to read Jack's, but we're going to have several paragraphs of Jack here if no one else speaks up. Brilliant academic morons. Laura, the Laura Tour 300 barbed wire, straight wire, much of it wildlife impenetrable, or worse, wild animal trapping. Yes, once again, people, if you didn't know, Point Reyes National Seashore didn't even have wildlife friendly fencing. Private ranchers have made more progress toward being wildlife friendly than Point Reyes National Seashore itself. Fences are so damaging. Yes, they are. I have tripped, fallen, punctured my feet, back when I was a barefoot runner. Sure, stepping on a thorn didn't feel good, but the only thing that really ever effed me up was running across all the abandoned barbed wire that ranchers have left across California. It just seems consistent that they don't pick up their messes. Ranchers are slumlords. Yes, they are. Particularly in a national park, interestingly enough. Prevent danger of wildfire by grazing cattle in wildlands, which makes lands more flammable with annual grasses. Yes, we cover that just about every Tuesday. Ranchers are getting handsomely paid off, not forced out. So only one dairy has been fully closed, ? Have any others removed their cows? I thought that the dairies and ranches were leaving. Well, you didn't bother to confirm that before you earlier in this conversation made the announcement that they were gone and that the elk were roaming freely. So thank you, everyone. There's more. There's a lot more. Maybe I'll do a part 2 of this, but I guess you can see my motivation. There's a wealth of knowledge inside of these conversations. Anyway, thank you for your comments and for listening in and for asking questions that helped me clarify this astronomically stupid Nature Conservancy plan to bring cattle back in where they paid cattle to leave. Thank you.